It was during the late fall. I was outside near my pond, skipping rocks, and I hear this grunting noise. So I stand up and turn around, and there's this big, black, brownish mass standing up over across the pond.
From Michigan to British Columbia, eyewitnesses and researchers have captured chilling Bigfoot encounters. Trail cameras show towering figures, eerie screams echo through forests, and footage reveals movements too real to ignore. Could multiple Sasquatch families still roam these remote woods, silently watching, just beyond human sight? Footage courtesy Travel Channel. Location: Forest, USA. What horrors wait in the darkness when a terrifying scream pulls three brothers into a nightmare they can't escape? When three brothers hear a blood-curdling scream in the forest, they venture out to investigate. Deep in the forest, their curiosity turns to terror as they encounter a massive, Bigfoot-like creature.
Ripped apart.
Let's go check it out.
It was extremely loud and terrifying.
But Herman said we can't go into.
Come on, let's go check it out.
But there really was not much of a group discussion. It was more like we were drawn to what had screamed.
Though the eerie sound unsettled them, the brothers resolved to investigate. Whether it was the rush of adrenaline or the sinking feeling of dread from the haunting noise, they cautiously approached the edge of the forest, hearts pounding as the shadows deepened around them.
We need to go home. Just keep together.
As we're walking, we heard a crack.
Stop.
As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker and the light began to fade. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed through the woods. Low, distant, and nothing like they had ever heard before. The brothers froze, their breath catching as a chilling realization crept in. They were not alone. One of them whispered, "Stop."
Look.
We looked up, and about 15 feet up, we saw what, at the time, only thing I could compare it to was something from the Planet of the Apes. It was the hairy man. I mean, that's all we knew what to call it, because I had nothing else to compare it to before. I had never heard of Bigfoot. I've never heard of Sasquatch. It was something that was never introduced to us.
They froze in place, a sudden stillness gripping them in silence. Slowly, their eyes drifted upward, and there, roughly 14 to 15 feet above the forest floor, partially hidden among the branches, something loomed. It wasn't moving. It didn't have to. Tall, broad, and covered in thick, matted hair, the figure seemed almost blended with the shadow. Its presence was wrong, ancient, watching, waiting. The brothers could only describe it as a hairy man.
It was squatted down with its left hand holding onto the tree. It didn't have any emotion on its face. It was just a stone look on its face. It just seemed like it was observing us.
What's it doing?
Shh. Be still.
We were terrified, and then when we made eye contact with it,
Though the name felt meaningless against the weight of what stood before them, they had no frame of reference, no myths, no warnings. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, these words had never been part of their world, and yet now, staring into the trees, they knew something impossible was real. And it had found them. Its face showed nothing, no anger, no fear, just a cold, empty stare. It didn't blink or move, yet its dark eyes never left them. The creature watched with quiet patience, as if waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Fear took hold of them.
that's when it made a move. It all came crashing down.
Ah! It's coming!
So as kids, there's no fight or flight, you know, it's just flight. We were terrified. We had to get out of the situation. It was that day that I realized in order to survive with my older brothers, I needed to be a faster runner.
Their eyes met the creature's, cold, still, and filled with something very old. Then, without warning, it moved slowly, like a nightmare waking up, ready to pull them into darkness. Then a whisper broke the silence, trembling with fear. "It's back!" Outside the window, a massive shadow loomed, black and overwhelming, blotting out the glass like a living nightmare.
What are you looking at? It's back!
It was huge. It took up the whole entire window. A man-shaped silhouette. It would have to be upwards to 8.5 to 9 feet.
A towering, twisted figure, human in shape but monstrous in size. At least 8.5, maybe 9 feet tall, an impossible giant watching from the darkness. Will they escape, or is the creature already too close? Do let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Footage courtesy DMAX UK. Location, Berry Hill, Kentucky. Cliff Barrickman, along with his team, organized a town hall at Berry Hill Mansion in Kentucky's capital, hoping to uncover credible Bigfoot encounters. He urged locals to share their experiences, sightings, strange sounds, or tracks. Even the smallest detail, he believed, might lead to the breakthrough they'd been searching for.
If you believe you have had a Bigfoot encounter, whether you have actually seen one or heard one or found prints or something like that, please be kind and raise your hand nice and high.
One man stood up and quietly shared his story. He had been at a friend's house, standing on the back porch late one evening when a strange sound came from beyond the tree line. It was low, unnatural, something that didn't belong. He froze, unable to move. "I don't know what it was," he said, "but it felt like it was meant for me, like a warning he wasn't supposed to ignore."
I had been at my friend's house and we were outside standing on the back porch. On the other side of the tree line, I hear this. And I just froze. I'm like, what the hell is that? The hair is standing up on my arms. I mean, whatever it was spooked me that bad.
The hair on his arms stood on end. Whatever it was out there, it had shaken him to his core. He couldn't explain it, but the fear was real and it ran deep. Then, another witness, a young woman, stood up to share her strange encounter. One evening, she heard a low, unsettling grunt near a pond. When she turned, she saw a large, dark shape moving across the water. Its color blended into the fog, almost disappearing in the mist. For a moment, she froze, then ran back to the house, feeling the silence grow heavier behind her.
It was during the late fall, noise. So I stand up and turn around, and there's this big, black, brownish mass standing up over across the pond. I take a good long look at it, and I run back to the house.
The only one with a chilling encounter that night. A man recalled his encounter from an August morning in 1974, when he was only 9 years old. The woods already felt strange, dark and heavy, as if something unseen was watching. He had gone out before sunrise, chasing his favorite squirrel hunting spot near the old hickory nut tree. But just as he reached halfway through the thick trees, a low, terrifying roar shattered the quiet. It wasn't like any animal he'd ever heard. Frozen with fear, he dropped to the cold ground, shadows creeping around him like something alive, pressing closer with every heartbeat.
We had a visual sighting not much farther than me to you guys. Okay, it was at 2 o'clock in the morning. I came out of my tent to relieve myself. Was standing there and just looked over. I saw something just moving back and forth, looking at me. But what I noticed was the smell. If you took an old dumpster that's in the middle of the summer and threw a dead deer in it, that's what it smelled like.
At that moment, the man shouted repeatedly that he was going to shoot. The creature roared again, echoing through the area. He later explained that this was the moment he fired, believing the shot had struck the kneecap area or somewhere near the feet. The creature stood up, almost 10 feet tall. It started moving, running after the man in big leaps and getting closer every second. If the fence hadn't been there, it might have caught him. To this day, he wonders, was it just a creature or something far more terrifying hiding in those woods? Footage courtesy, Animal Planet. Location, Magician, USA. Could recent evidence from a hidden trail camera suggest the presence of multiple Sasquatch families in Michigan's Upper Peninsula? The BFRO team heads to Michigan to meet a landowner, Craig Salk, who claims one of his trail cameras captured something strange lurking deep in the woods.
Hunting guide named Craig Salk, who owns 80 acres of land up here, puts up trail cameras on his property to monitor the game moving through here. And one of those cameras happened to capture something that Craig can't explain. From what I can tell, it doesn't look like a person in that it all has one uniform tone. So that's either a hunter dressed up to all be one color, or it's a Sasquatch.
Matt examined the photo Craig sent and instantly knew it wasn't ordinary. The image seemed to point towards something big, maybe even proof that more than one family of Sasquatches could be living across Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Cliff Barrickman, a veteran Sasquatch investigator with decades of experience, brought his sharp eye to analyze the mysterious photo. The camera had taken 3 images in under 2 minutes. 2 were empty, but the middle frame revealed a large, upright figure half hidden behind the trees.
The photographs are pretty interesting. A little blob squatchy, but there is clearly something there. Out of the 3 photographs, taken less than 2 minutes apart from one another, in that middle photograph, that large figure is there, but not in the other 2. That means something moved in and moved out of frame in those 3 photographs. The middle photograph is the key. That's the one that might hold the Sasquatch.
It appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast. That single photo stood out, a possible glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. At first glance, the photo seemed unremarkable. A deer stood in the foreground, typical forest life. But behind it, barely visible between the trees, was a dark, towering figure. What looked like a normal wildlife snapshot quickly became something far more mysterious. When the team compared the 3 photos in sequence,
The first thing I thought was, oh, there it is, definitive proof. Deer exist, and so do their butts. But it turns out there was something more interesting in the background. By scrolling through the 3 photographs in sequence, you can clearly see that the middle photograph has something that the other 2 do not. There is a figure there. It is either a human or a Bigfoot, and it's our job to find out which one.
the pattern was undeniable. Only the middle image showed movement. A tall, upright form appeared for a moment, then vanished completely. Whether it was a human or something else was still unknown, but for the team, this was no coincidence. It was a lead worth chasing. When Craig met the BFRO team, he pointed toward the tree where the trail camera was mounted. The camera was facing north, right through this area, he explained, marking the spot where he first noticed the strange movement. That's where it all began. As the field team studied the footage, their attention locked on the middle frame, a humanoid figure standing silently among the trees.
This here's the tree that the camera is on.
And which direction was the camera facing?
It's facing to the north, right through here.
So that's the stump that the deer was smelling?
Yes.
Why was it smelling the stump?
We put minerals out for the deer for, it's better for antler growth, and it's supposed to help the does with their milk production and stuff like that. So we put that out all over the property. We have 10 cameras out usually all year on the 80 acres, and we look at around 20,000 pictures. And in the sequence of the 3 pictures, the middle picture, I just can't explain what is in it. And that's why I was hoping you guys would be able to help me.
It wasn't there before, and it wasn't there after. Whatever it was had moved in and out of sight in seconds. Fast, silent, deliberate. That one frame changed everything. What exactly walked through that shot? And how many more might be watching from the woods? Footage, courtesy, Wild Man of the Woods. Location, Pennsylvania. Deep in the wild part of Bigfoot country. People have shared stories that sound too strange to be made up. Bigfoot enthusiast Mona Joan had her own reason to believe the creature might be real. And it didn't happen on a trail or during a search. It happened much closer to home. Her young son was about 10 when he had a strange encounter in the woods behind their backyard. He and his friend were playing near the barn when he suddenly noticed something standing at the edge of the trees, watching them quietly.
So him and the neighbor boy had been back behind their barn, back next to their barn, playing and laughing and doing the things kids do. And he said that something was back there just watching them do it. And his story to this day, he is 21 years old. His story has never changed. He still swears that that happened. And then he said that he saw another one, a different color one down by the creek, because we live right where there's a small creek too.
Even now, more than 10 years later, he still talks about that day. His story has never changed. He says whatever he saw that afternoon was real, and that he'll never forget the feeling of being watched.
We'll go out into our backyard alone at night. Nor have we ever. And I was out there watching stars one day and my kids came out and we don't want you out here. It's just a strange feeling in that whole backyard. I kind of like at first kind of was like, oh yeah, right, you know. But I believe him at this point.
Researcher Scott Tompkins explained that Pennsylvania has almost 1,600 Bigfoot reports, even more than Washington State, where Bigfoot stories first began. With its thick forests and deep valleys, it's easy to imagine something hiding there, staying unseen for years.
Perhaps are becoming a little more aware of Bigfoot in that region, and they're paying more attention. I have seen an uptick in reports, so I'm very, like you, curious to why that is. With that said, I think that area is able to host a lot of big mammal wildlife. And now there's more hunting activity, there's more hiking activity, there's more reports being emitted.
Then came Monica Bassett's story. Her brother often heard strange noises in the woods and always blamed bears. But when his dog was found dead, with no sound, no struggle, just gone, he started to wonder if it was something else.
Another time he went out, there was something in the yard, and he went out with the spotlight, and he spotlighted 2 feet. And he didn't go up, he didn't do anything, he just ran back in the house. He didn't know if it was a bear or not. He didn't really look at it that close. You know, I was just glad that my brother could hear that maybe he had some little inkling I wasn't crazy.
Finally, Emily Fleur, a teacher and researcher, shared how the famous Bigfoot film made her question everything. She said even though the footage we see online is old and blurry, you can still notice muscles moving under the hair, the natural way the body shifts, details that don't look like a costume.
When I first saw the film, I thought, there's no way that's a person in a costume, because the version of the film that we see online has been copied over so many times from the original. It's blurry, it's discolored, you can't see many details. But after I started looking into this film and I saw earlier generation copies of it, I started to realize that there's actually a lot of evidence just within the film itself.
The more she studied it, the harder it became to explain it away. If it wasn't fake, then what exactly did that camera capture? And could it still be out there today?
We're stunned. You know, what was that? I wanted to go down that power line cut and look, you know, not chase it, but see if I could see anything down in the creek bed or whatever. And I was told by the people in charge of the expedition, because I was just volunteering to help, like, just stay put. We don't know who or what it was, you know, be safe, all that, which was hard to do.
Footage courtesy, Cabin in the Woods, location, British Columbia, Canada. Most Bigfoot videos are shaky blurs lost in the dark, but the Harley Hoffman footage was different. When slowed down frame by frame, it revealed details too real to ignore. Muscles moved naturally beneath thick hair, and each stride looked powerful, balanced, and purposeful. Was this the clearest Bigfoot sighting ever captured?
Let's be honest, most Bigfoot videos are blurry, shaky, and easy to dismiss. But what if I told you that there's one clip, filmed in 2001, that shows visible muscle movement, soft tissue, and even a possible juvenile clinging to the creature's chest? Details that no costume could replicate.
In 2001, a video emerged that seemed to capture something far more convincing. A towering figure striding through the wilderness. Its muscles moved naturally beneath the hair, every step too real to be a costume. Around 20 years ago, a video appeared online, uploaded by a man named Hutch Hoffman. Titled Real Bigfoot Video Exclusive, it quickly spread across the internet, claiming to show something incredible.
The creature's gait and natural movement through extremely dense and difficult terrain are a strong testament to its natural athleticism and power, traits that would be obviously extremely difficult for a human actor to replicate, especially in a cumbersome costume.
A creature unlike anything seen before. This is the story of Harley Hoffman and the astonishing footage he filmed in 2001, deep within the rugged, forested wilderness of British Columbia's southwest Lower Mainland. What started as an ordinary day became one of the most debated Bigfoot encounters in history. The footage revealed a towering, upright figure moving with astonishing ease through tangled undergrowth and uneven terrain.
These minute and almost unconscious details lend an authenticity that's difficult for even the most determined skeptic to dismiss, at least if they're being logical and thorough. But size and proportion aren't the only compelling anatomical details here. In certain frames, observers have noted what could possibly be an ear or another anatomical feature.
Its stride was steady and powerful, each motion showing a natural grace that felt far from human. The creature's broad shoulders flexed with each step, moving with a power that felt completely natural to the wild. On closer examination, the footage seemed to reveal unmistakable signs of real anatomy. Defined muscles shifting as the creature moved, rounded shoulders, and a visible tricep area.
Despite strong contrast between the figure and the background that should reveal such flaws if they were there. The compelling nature of the Hoffman footage lies not only in what we can see, but also those details that we can't see. The lack of discernible seams, the fluid gait, the soft tissue, muscle movement that appears quite prominently, and the seemingly undoctored nature of the footage that was captured on a simple handheld video camera back in 2001. All of this points to a real organic subject, not a fabricated suit.
Even a faint outline of the spine and upper back structure could be seen beneath the thick hair. According to experienced Hollywood creature designer Bill Munns, creating lifelike muscle movement remains one of the hardest things to achieve, even with today's most advanced ape suits and special effects. Harley never backed down from his claim. He insisted the footage was genuine and urged skeptics to study it using real science, not just dismiss it out of disbelief. To him, curiosity was key, and doubt without evidence was no different from blind faith.
This bizarre but verified behind-the-scenes story provides a simple but powerful explanation for this video's strange path to the public, and in doing so, it adds to its legitimacy. At least, that's my conclusion.
If Harley was telling the truth, then what exactly did his camera capture that day? And could the same creature still be walking those forests right now? Deep in the forests of West Virginia, a legend quietly roamed. Bigfoot, often linked to the Pacific Northwest, seemed to have found a perfect home here. Witness George Kennedy and investigator Russ Jones set out to uncover the truth behind these strange encounters. George recalled a story from his childhood. His bus driver had shared an encounter that haunted her for life. One morning, while waiting for the children, she heard strange noises coming from the woods. Curious, she stepped off the bus just after sunrise and froze. A huge, hair-covered creature was moving fast along the hillside. In seconds, it leaped onto the roof of the bus. She stood there, terrified, unable to move.
You hear things, but as an adult, when something happens to you, a lot of those things come flooding back that you'd completely written off. When I was a child, there was a bus driver for the McDowell County Schools. Actually, her bus route was in Panther State Forest, which is right across from our property line. Every morning she would stop, park her bus, wait on the kids to walk out. That particular morning, the bus was not there. What had happened was she claimed that as she was waiting, backed into this, it's called George's Fork Hollow, as she was waiting on the kids to come down and get on the bus, she heard something in the woods coming toward her. She got out of the bus just to look. It was right after daylight, and she described something like a big, well, hairy-covered monster. It ran off the side of the hill and jumped onto the roof of the bus.
Panicked, she drove straight to the bus garage, convinced the creature was still on top. When she arrived, shaking and in tears, she quit her job immediately, leaving behind years of service and a story no one could forget.
She thought still on the roof. She went up to the bus garage, which was in the little town of Jaeger, and quit. She quit her job. Now, how I know this, I was one of those kids walking to that bus. I had completely forgotten about it until later in life when something happened to me and my mother reminded me of it.
Paranormal investigator Lon Hamlin believed that the massive ghost-like figures seen in the area might have been Bigfoot. He explained that local legends spoke of ancient tribes traveling through misty valleys, and that these modern sightings could be echoes of a creature that has survived, unseen, for centuries.
Until you find something that kind of backs that up. Now, I haven't seen any giant ghosts, but it doesn't mean they're not there. We've also had the theory that, these giant ghosts could have simply been Bigfoot sightings seen through fog by, ancient people as they came through the valley.
If no other state on the East Coast would be habitable to something like a Sasquatch, West Virginia would be the place. The habitat is so large for something like that to exist, and the population is so low. West Virginia's state population is still declining. We have people moving every year and leaving the state, and that just opens up more and more real estate for something like a Bigfoot that would want to live at.
Each year, hundreds of reports are logged, most short and unclear. A shadow across the road, strange knocking sounds, or rocks thrown from the dark.
Hundreds of reports later, most of them that you get are, you saw something crossing the road, you got a brief encounter with something, throwing rocks at you or whatever it happens to be. You hear something hit a tree, different things like that that could or could not be anything. But a couple times a year, just in the state of West Virginia or Ohio, you will get legitimately an awesome report.
But once in a while, a detailed close encounter emerges, the kind that reignites every investigator's belief that something real might still be out there. George described one such moment. He stood frozen as a massive figure moved slowly through the trees, about 50 yards away, walking in a steady line parallel to him. Its eyes never left his. Then, before fading into the pines, it turned and released a deep, guttural roar that echoed through the forest.
I froze. I watched this thing walk, and it walks all the way, probably about 50 yards from left to right, paralleling me, and it never takes its eyes off of me. Even though it's walking through undergrowth, it never takes its eyes off of me. And it goes up into a pine thicket, and it turns, and it roars at me again. And when it roars, it's kind of a howling roar that I can't explain it. I don't know if you've ever heard a lion, if you've ever been to the zoo and heard a lion roar. It had that kind of depth to it, but it was a lot stronger. And I'm still shocked. I'm just sitting here. It roars again, 3 times.
What was really watching him that day, and how many more still hide in the shadows? Over the years, Jeff Rohn had his share of strange encounters, most of his Bigfoot sightings happening at night, until his most recent one. This interview was recorded just 5 days after that sighting in Idaho. Jeff remembered it clearly. He and his friend Jim had gone camping in the Bitterroot Mountains, planning to stay 2 nights. But after the first night, the heat was unbearable, so they decided to pack up and head out, taking a long drive before returning to Jim's place in Orofino, Idaho.
My buddy Jim and I are up in the Bitterroot Mountains in Idaho, camping, and we were going to stay 2 nights, and after the first night we decided it's just too hot, let's pull up camp and go for a big long drive somewhere and just go back to his place in Orofino, Idaho.
As they drove down a forest road that followed a creek, Jeff joked that he wouldn't be surprised if a Bigfoot family stepped out right in front of them. They both laughed, but only half a mile later, the laughter stopped. Jeff, looking toward the creek, suddenly froze. A massive black figure stood there, broad, towering, and impossible to mistake. Startled, he shouted, "Jim, stop! There's a huge Bigfoot."
We packed up camp and we started heading down the Forest Service road that follows a creek. And I said to Jim, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Bigfoot family standing right in the middle of the road. And we kind of laughed. About a half a mile down the road, I'm looking at the creek, keep my eyes on the creek, and sure enough, there's this huge black figure. I see these huge shoulders like that, and I say, "Jim, stop, there's a huge moose. I mean Bigfoot, back up." And so we backed up a little bit, and he says, "Oh, I see it too."
Jeff stared at the dark shape for what felt like forever, maybe 4 seconds, its shoulders wide and body massive. Jim caught a glimpse for only 2 or 3 seconds, but that was enough. Both men sat frozen in disbelief.
And so I guess at that point, I'd already seen it for about 3 or 4 seconds, and Jim saw it for 2 or 3 seconds, and it had stood up.
Jeff described it as huge, with thick, powerful shoulders and a body that filled the creek bed. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. One moment it stood there, clear as day. The next, it had vanished, leaving only the sound of rushing water behind.
And then 1 second it's there, and in the blink of an eye, it's just not there anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't freaking out. No adrenaline kicked in. It just seemed perfectly natural that we were going to see something like that. And so I jumped out of the truck and said, "Jim, I'm going to walk around a little bit." So he pulled forward, stopped, and I took a little video on my iPhone and just to kind of preserve the moment. And then we kind of stood around and talked for a little bit and checked out the spot over and over. And then after about 10 or 15 minutes, I started getting goosebumps and kind of getting excited, like, wow, that was so cool and stuff. And then we're like, well, I guess we'll head on down the road.
He also recalled another memory, one from years earlier. Everyone was inside the tent when a strong skunk-like smell drifted through the air. Something was moving just outside, its steps slow and heavy. Jeff's stepdad peeked out and said, "It's just a skunk." But that uneasy feeling, the sense of being watched, stayed with Jeff for years.
And looking back, I didn't realize it at the time, but my stepdad, we were in a tent, and my stepdad, we all smelled a skunk or something, and heard something walking around, and my stepdad, I think he stuck his head out the tent and, "Oh, it's just a skunk." And that always stuck with me.
He remembered another moment sitting in a theater in Woodburn, Oregon, watching the Patterson-Gimlin footage play before a movie. His friends laughed, but Jeff didn't. The way that creature moved, it felt real. From that moment on, he couldn't shake the feeling that Bigfoot truly existed.
And then I was at the Pix Theater in Woodburn, Oregon with some friends of mine. We're going to watch a movie, and that's when they rolled out the Patterson-Gimlin clip. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's real. And my friends all laughed at me. But it was, from then on, it was on. I don't argue with people or try to convince anybody. I'm not trying to change anyone's religion or, political views or anything, or force my experiences down their throat. I just say seeing is believing, and if you don't believe me, that's fine. But I saw what I saw.
Was what Jeff saw on that screen really real, or just the beginning of something far stranger? Rich Germeau, a former law enforcement officer turned Bigfoot researcher, brings a disciplined, investigative approach to the mystery. His background in the Marines and police work gives his research a grounded, scientific edge. From Washington's Olympic Peninsula to the remote wilderness of Alaska, his life has always been tied to the wild.
My name is Rich Germeau. I've lived in this area for most of my life, except for 3 years when I lived in Alaska when I was a kid. I grew up playing in the woods and fishing and hunting and getting driven around by my grandpa and visiting old people that were farmers and loggers, and mostly the Olympic Peninsula area, Washington State. In 1997, I joined the Marine Corps Reserves, and I did that for some 5.5 years. And then, while I was doing that in 98, I became a police officer for Department of Defense in Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. That's where I kind of started my law enforcement career. I was 21 years old. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then I moved out to the West End out in Forks, and I became a cop in La Push. And that's where I had my first Bigfoot encounter.
But in Forks, while serving as a police officer, Rich came face to face with something that changed everything. Lonesome Creek winds through dense brush so thick you can't see 10 feet ahead. During that time, campers and tourists filled the nearby beaches of La Push. It was early July, warm, clear and busy. Yet, just a few hundred yards away from all that noise, something unexpected moved out from the shadows.
And Lonesome Creek comes out, and at that time there was a bunch of brush off to the left where it was really dense and you couldn't see into it all the way down to where the creek is. And there was actually a lot of people camping down there at that time because La Push is a big camping area down by Lonesome Creek Store, and there's a couple of like hotels down there, lodges, and then they have campsites and all kinds of stuff, and there's a lot of surfers that go down there. And this particular time it was real nice weather and there was a lot of people. It was early July and there was a lot of people out there at the beach. So it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of people around. There were people everywhere that day. And in fact, close proximity to where this thing came out of the bushes at, within a couple hundred yards, there was just tons of people on the beach around the corner.
As he walked down the hill, about 70 yards ahead, Rich saw a massive figure step from the brush onto the road. It moved fast, smooth and silent. No head bob, no stumble. In just 4 long strides, it crossed and vanished into the thick salmonberry bushes.
And I'm coming down the hill towards this, and I'm probably like 70 yards when I first see this thing. And then it's just big figure just steps out of the brush on the beach side of the road, and then it just walks across the road somewhat swiftly, and it doesn't even look at me, and it kind of just glides across the road. It's like it was non-human in the gait. It was very fluid. I mean, and I guess in the nature that it walked, no head bob, it just kind of glided. And it took about 4 steps and it hit the fence and it disappeared into the salmonberries.
He tried to analyze what he'd seen, but nothing made sense. It was human-shaped but massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with an enormous chest and a strange fluid motion that didn't look human at all.
When I first saw it, I was a trained observer. I'm a police officer. And I saw this thing that it was humanoid, but it didn't look human. And I'm trying to put it in the correct classification box. And it's bouncing back out in my brain. It's like, no, it doesn't fit. You know, what is it? You know, well, I know what it is, but those aren't real, so it can't be that. I mean, I'm looking at this giant figure that was like, you know, that thick from chest to back. I mean, and huge, 8 feet tall, non-human gait, but humanoid. And I'm trying to classify what this thing is, but it's not real. And I know what it is, but what it is not real.
Years later, in 2008, a Bigfoot researcher named Dirk heard about Rich's sighting and contacted him. That conversation led Rich to share his story publicly for the first time. And soon after, he began actively investigating.
Later on, I moved to Eastern Washington for a year, and in 2004, I came and worked for the Mason County Sheriff's Office. And in 2008, through a mutual friend of my wife's, she knew this guy Dirk, who was a big Bigfoot researcher from the 80s and 90s and currently. And she knew him just from town. And she had told him my story and gave him my phone number. So he called me one day, and so I told him my story. This was in 2008.
Rich focused his research on isolated routes Bigfoot might use, setting cameras in natural corridors and rugged areas. Soon, he started finding signs, tracks, movement, even recoverable DNA from the Hama Hama area. Lake Cushman became his main base, where he spent nearly 30 hours a week searching.
And you take something that is hard to find and you start moving into a spot where at some point you know it's going to come through this area. If you can find evidence, they're using it. So we started researching these travel routes and funnels, and we started finding evidence of them using some of these places, right? So we started putting cameras up right away, and we had success pretty fast. We started finding tracks and different things in some of these spots. I got pictures of of one up in the Hama Hama on a game camera, and was able to recover DNA off of that. My main research area ultimately probably was the Hamma Hamma area around Lake Cushman. That's where I probably spent most of my time.
Rich became convinced Bigfoot was real, an undiscovered ape or relic hominid, still surviving in remote forests. He noticed a pattern. No matter how much human activity increased, sightings and evidence always reappeared in the same regions, generation after generation.
And the fact that I knew that Bigfoots were real because I had seen one, I was a full believer in the fact that these things were either an ape or some sort of a relic hominid, and they were just really rare. And that's why they had existed mostly undetected up to this point. And it wasn't until I started really, looking in flats and then started to go out and research sites myself. And I could go into these places that I would research in flats that had all this historical data on repeated sightings. And even if there hadn't been anything recent within 20 years, if I would start going into a place and looking around long enough, I'd start finding stuff. They'd still be there. I mean, my experience was if you could find historical data that they were in a place, they didn't leave. And it hadn't mattered really what had happened to the place. It didn't matter if there was development there. It didn't matter if there was logging. It didn't make any difference whatsoever. They were still generally there.
But then came something stranger. Multiple witnesses began describing odd experiences, details that repeated from case to case. Rich wasn't sure what to believe, but he couldn't ignore how often it happened. The deeper he went, the more he felt that something, or someone, knew he was there.
A lot of this weird stuff was coming up with different witnesses I had talked to. And I had dedicated as much time and resources into these places, but I had talked to witnesses that were corroborating what I was hearing from Michael and other people, but I still wasn't buying into it altogether. I was just thinking, well, it's got to be another explanation for this type of thing that seems to reoccur in this Bigfoot phenomena. But I wasn't quite ready to buy in. But it's building up in me because I have all these resources. I'm putting all this effort into these places where I know that I'm right around these things. They're aware of me, right?
He kept returning to that site, but it never happened again. No new tracks, no movement, only that one unforgettable encounter. Was Rich Jameau truly face to face with a living legend? Or is Bigfoot still the greatest mystery hiding in the forests of the Pacific Northwest? Footage courtesy Lexington Productions. Nestled deep in the heart of California's Humboldt County, surrounded by mist-soaked redwoods and winding creeks, lies the small town of Willow Creek, a place where myth and memory share the same air. For most, it's just another mountain town tucked along the Trinity River. But for locals like Eric Nelson, it's something more, the birthplace of a legend. Eric's voice carries the tone of someone who's seen both the ordinary and the extraordinary. I've been a resident of Willow Creek for 22 years, he says. I spent nearly 3 decades with the California Highway Patrol before I ever imagined I'd be working at a Bigfoot museum.
My name's Eric Nelson. I've been a resident of Willow Creek for 22 years. I am a former Highway Patrolman of California, 27-year veteran. I moved up here to finish my career, so to speak, to work out of my home as a resident post officer. How does someone like me become a person that works in a Bigfoot museum?
He chuckles when he says it, but only lightly, because here, Bigfoot isn't a joke, it's history. Eric remembers the first time he saw the Jim McLaren statue, that towering figure of Bigfoot standing guard at the crossroads of State Routes 96 and 299.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm 58 years old. Bigfoot became a thing to me in the 70s. I'd lived on the coast in Arcata, which is about 30 miles as a crow flies from here. And when you're living on the coast, you usually come out to the warmer region, which was Willow Creek. 7 years old, we came out to Willow Creek, and right smack dab in the middle of town, at the intersection of SR 96 and SR 299, was a giant Bigfoot statue.
He was 7 years old then, and the statue was massive, mythical even. His parents told him it was Bigfoot, the creature said to roam the surrounding hills.
It's called the Jim McLaren statue. It was formidable when I was 7 years old, and of course I was going to ask my parents, what is that? And they proceeded to tell me it's Bigfoot. This region's known for Bigfoot. It was an age, a part of my life where a lot of things were either mystical or enchanting, and this became one of those. We continued on out to camp at Trinity Lake that next day, and a local ranger that we knew came to our campfire. And of course I asked about Bigfoot.
That same summer, a park ranger sat by their campfire at Trinity Lake and whispered stories of screams in the woods and eyes glowing in the dark. I was so captivated, Eric recalls, afraid to breathe, afraid to miss a word.
And he proceeded to tell us these enchanting stories around the campfire at night, telling us that no, this creature has been sighted and lives in these woods around us that could be watching us. I was so enamored and taken that I was afraid to breathe for fear of listening or missing a word. So between the statue and then having an ensuing campfire chat, I was hooked.
Decades later, those childhood whispers became something tangible. In 2009, while camping near the Klamath River with a friend from a nearby village, Eric heard a story that made the hairs on his neck stand up. A salmon fisherman who'd once heard a scream so powerful he said, "Something out there could crush me." His lip trembled as he spoke, proof that whatever he'd heard had shaken him to his core. Stories like these echo through Willow Creek like the river itself, steady, unending. Among the locals, especially the families who've been here for generations, the creature is known by many names: the Ridge Walker, Hairy Man, Omar. In native culture, his existence is simply accepted, a matter of fact rather than debate.
And once or twice a year, I would get a story about, yes, someone saw the Ridge Walker, Omar, or Bigfoot. In the Native American culture here, it's matter of fact. I heard the museum needed volunteers, and a friend of mine had said, hey, why don't you volunteer? I know you're interested in history and Bigfoot. So I'm an everyday man otherwise. I'm not a researcher. I'm not somebody that goes out looking for Bigfoot. I didn't anticipate to have the context I do have with people, and it's been wonderful.
Eric eventually began volunteering at the Willow Creek China Flat Museum, home to the largest collection of Bigfoot artifacts in the country. Each summer, thousands visit, most of them drawn by curiosity, others by memory. 98% come for the Bigfoot exhibit, Eric says, and some stay to tell me their story.
We have about 2,000 people a summer that come through the museum, and occasionally they tell me their stories. And these stories are emotional. These stories are persons that have had experiences. They weren't looking for Bigfoot. They weren't looking for an opportunity to discuss it. But because they're in a situation where they felt comfortable, it comes out. And I feel there's a real catharsis for these persons finally getting a chance to get a spot where they could share their stories.
One man did just that. A retired logger from Oklahoma, visiting with his wife, waited until the museum had emptied before speaking. "I've never told anyone outside my family," he began.
Several times in the last 3 years, I've had persons, they hesitate a bit and let people leave the museum. They tell me their stories. I mean, their encounter stories. I can tell you 2 years ago, when I was sitting here with my wife, a gentleman came in from Oklahoma. He was there with his wife. I was a young boy, my dad was a logger there. His wife interrupts him. He looks at my wife, she looks at my wife, excuse me, she says, "What he's gonna tell you right now, he's not told a single soul outside of his family for 50 years.
He was 10 years old, fishing on Coffee Creek near Trinity Lake. He saw two slender, hair-covered figures playing in the water like children. For several minutes, he watched, frozen.
What he's gonna tell you right now, he's not told a single soul outside of his family for 50 years. So he says, 10 years old, Trinity Lake, I'm fishing on Coffee Creek, and I'm fishing for an hour, and I get to the confluence of the Trinity River. He goes, I see two skinny, hair-covered apes, and they're playing in the water, and they don't notice me.
Then, a sharp whistle from across the river. Both figures stopped, turned, and vanished into the trees.
He goes, I don't know how long I stared at these things. It seemed like 15, 20 minutes. It was likely 2 or 3. He said he hears a shrill whistle from across the river in the wood line, whereupon the two figures look up, look startled. He looks startled, he says, in return. They hesitate, he hesitates, and then they scramble up out of the river, never to be seen again.
When he told his father, he was told they were just bears. But half a century later, the memory still made every hair on his arm stand upright.
He goes back home that day, tells his dad and his mom both laughed at him, oh, those were bears. Because I didn't see bears, Dad, I saw apes. And his dad wouldn't let him entertain the fact that these were apes or Bigfoot. As he's telling me the story, my wife yells at me, she goes, look at his arms. Every hair on both arms was raised.
Eric recognized the signs immediately. The tremor in his voice, the involuntary shiver. He'd seen the same reactions during his law enforcement career.
And what I can tell you, after being in law enforcement for 27 years, I used to interview a lot of persons that were in very traumatic situations. Good witnesses that are living the event, they give you body tells. They have emotional reactions when they're reliving the event.
People relive trauma when they tell these stories, he says softly, and I believe every word they tell me.
And I've seen these things. And these persons have shared these stories. We've made a connection. So when people ask me if I believe in Bigfoot, I say I've never had an experience. I would need to have an experience or it'd have to be proven scientifically. However, these people that tell me these stories, I believe them 100%.
The roots of the legend go back even further. Bluff Creek, 1958, a logging road north of Willow Creek.
In 1958, there had been a road building crew that was assigned to the Bluff Creek region. The road building crew was mainly from Willow Creek proper. They had been there already for a year and a half, and there were rumors coming from that forest. These workers would go out and work for the week. They were coming across things.
Workers began finding their heavy equipment displaced, diesel drums tossed aside as if by invisible giants.
Diesel drums that were thrown around, no apparent indication that machinery had moved them, food missing, things that weren't nice, normal, and not one person could do. It involved a lot of strength to do it, to move these things. So the rumor was already in the community. Jerry Crew, he was the supervisor of this road crew, told people locally, I'm coming across very large footprints. He'd come back to town. He taught Sunday school. He was a very pious man. His reputation in town here was...
Then came the footprints, massive, human-like impressions in the mud. A foreman named Jerry Crew decided to cast one using plaster of Paris.
So in '58, he had a hunting partner named Bob Titmus. Bob Titmus is very important to this museum specifically. We'll discuss that later. He told Jerry, well, you can use plaster of Paris. So Jerry Crew goes out to the site. He casts a print with plaster of Paris.
On October 3rd, he took the mold to the Humboldt Times. The editor, Andrew Genzoli, gave it a name that would echo forever, Bigfoot.
That was October 3rd, I believe. He drives straight down to the coast the next day and meets with the editor of the Humboldt Times, Andrew Genzoli. Names it Bigfoot that moment.
Within weeks, newspapers across the world ran the story.
He writes a very in-depth article about it. That goes on the AP wire the next day, and it became wildfire around the world. The 50s, the Yeti in the Himalayas was something that international teams were looking for. So this coincided.
Today, Bigfoot researchers still walk the same ridges. Men like Todd Samples and Trevor Miller hike the forests with recorders, plaster, and 3D scanners, tracking fresh impressions and night sounds in the Six Rivers National Forest.
And the interest was already there worldwide. Now you have the abominable snowman named Bigfoot in Northern California. Andrew Genzoli is quoted as saying that within a month he received 2,500 written letters to his office and over 1,000 inquiries from reporters from around the world.
They describe the creature as massive, 8 to 10 feet tall, foul-smelling, yet eerily human. For Eric Nelson and the people of Willow Creek, belief isn't about proof, it's about presence, a feeling stitched into the soil, the creeks, and the campfire stories passed down for generations. As dusk falls over the Trinity River, the forest quiets. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridges, a new sound might echo tonight. And in Willow Creek, they'll be listening, because here, the legend never truly sleeps. Footage courtesy Unspeakable Fans. It started as nothing more than a light-hearted adventure. A group of friends setting out to spend the night deep in the Pacific Northwest wilderness. With cameras, camping gear, and a sense of humor, they planned to track down the creature of legend, Bigfoot. At first, the trip was filled with laughter. They teased each other about what they might find, joked about Benny the Bigfoot, and filmed mock interviews in front of the camera.
Could be Bigfoot's grocery running path.
There is a broken branch on the...
And it's really high up, and he's a tall man. What do you think?
I'm here to find Bigfoot. The one that strays off path.
The forest around them felt harmless under the afternoon sun, but as the light dimmed, the mood began to change. The trees thickened. The sounds of the forest, birds, insects, even the wind, began to fade into an eerie stillness. It was the kind of silence that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something unseen to stir. They set up camp in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. Lanterns flickered. A fire crackled, sending brief bursts of light across their faces. They laughed again, cooking, sharing stories, and building what they jokingly called a feast for Bigfoot. Even their jokes carried a hint of nervousness, a way to drown out the growing sense that they weren't alone.
You heard that, right? It sounded like a small animal, not no Bigfoot, though. Everyone stand completely still.
As night deepened, strange noises began echoing through the woods. At first, it was faint, a shuffle of leaves, a branch snapping in the distance. Then came heavier sounds, footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving beyond the glow of the campfire. The forest was alive with something watching them, and every flicker of shadow seemed to move. One of the friends volunteered to act as bait, tied lightly to a tree in a Bigfoot costume as part of their stunt for the camera. They laughed while setting it up, but the laughter died when the woods fell completely silent. What followed was a sound that none of them would forget. A low, guttural scream that carried through the forest, shaking the still air. For several minutes, the group searched the tree line, shining their torches into the dark. Their breaths grew shallow.
Ain't no way. Ain't no way. Come here. Come here. Look at this.
Yo, you
What?
pranking us right now, dude?
What is that?
You see it?
What, this? Kind of looks like a Bigfoot. You talking about this?
Yeah.
Dude, this is where I heard the noise when I was tied up.
Here, flash it that way. Yeah, look, there's another one right there. See that bare spot?
Huh? You think so? No.
Dude, I don't know. We've been walking on this for a while. Are there any broken tree branches above us?
Probably tripping.
Something was moving between the trunks, large and upright, yet too fast to follow. The moment they turned their lights toward it, the movement vanished. They regrouped, trying to rationalize what they had heard. A bear, a mountain lion, maybe an echo. But even those explanations couldn't explain the weight of the footsteps or the sudden drop in temperature that settled over the clearing. Later in the night, they split into small groups, wandering different trails to continue their search. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Uprooted trees, branches twisted high overhead, and stones that seemed to have been thrown deliberately across their path. None of them admitted it, but all felt it. They were being followed. When they finally returned to camp, exhausted and uneasy, the fire had nearly died out. They tried to laugh again, to pretend the tension was gone. But then came the final noise, a single heavy footstep in the dark, close enough to make the ground tremble. No one saw what caused it. No one stayed long enough to find out. That night, they didn't find Bigfoot. But deep in those woods, something found them first. Footage, courtesy History Channel. It was meant to be an ordinary evening drive. Andrew Dwall had taken his 4x4 up a forest road, testing its limits on the rugged slopes. When he reached the top of the mountain, he pulled over to take in the fading light. The world stretched below in silence, the air sharp and still. Then, between the shadows of freshly logged trees, something moved. At first, he thought it was a trick of light, but as it rose from behind a stump, the figure became unmistakable. Tall, broad, and covered in dark hair that hung in tangled drapes. Its arms dangled low, its face eerily flat and human-like.
Typical picture of a Sasquatch that you'd see on a commercial. It had the flat face, the long draped hair, his arms were down by his knees. And it popped up from behind that stump, just kind of came up. They had moved up into about that range, and I just kind of laughed it off, you know? You don't expect to see something like that walking on two legs through the bush.
For a moment, Andrew froze. Then he laughed nervously, convincing himself it had to be a bear or some hiker in strange gear. But when he tossed a few stones into the woods, the forest answered back. From behind his vehicle came a sound so powerful it shook the air. A deep, synchronized roar, like a pack of 20 dogs barking in perfect unison. It hit them like a physical blow, vibrating through their chests. That was enough. Heart racing, Andrew jumped into his truck and sped down the mountain, leaving the echo of that impossible voice behind. Footage courtesy Mysteries Unknown. In the summer of 2021, Dee and her husband Peter made their way to their family cabin, nestled near the edge of the Rocky Mountain National Park. It was a place of stillness. No neighbors, no traffic, just the whispering trees and the sound of the river nearby. They planned a peaceful stay with their 2 dogs, unaware that the next 4 nights would shake every sense of security they had ever known. The first night began quietly. The air outside was crisp, the forest calm. Then, just past 10:30 p.m., came the first crash. Rocks, heavy ones, striking the side of the cabin.
Where this happened in way out in the middle of nowhere next to the Rockies, and just kind of walk us through this encounter.
Well, Rocky Mountain National Park is a real wild place. And so our cabin is not far from Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. So there were some fires going on in the park, and we decided that since...
Dee shot up in bed. Peter, sedated by his heart medication, slept through it. The dogs, usually fearless, huddled close to her, trembling. Then came a second noise. A slap so forceful against the cabin wall that Dee thought anyone human would have broken their hand doing it. That night stretched endlessly. Something, or several things, circled the cabin, scraping, tapping, hitting the wood. When morning came, Dee searched for prints, but the forest floor of pine needles revealed nothing. The second night was worse. The motion lights flickered on and off as if triggered by something large moving just out of view.
But the red eye shine, and there was a space between those eyes that showed it had to be a big face. And but I did see the shoulders, and you couldn't see a neck. It was like came down, and you could see all the reddish brown hair all the way to the ground.
She stepped out onto the deck and shouted into the darkness, demanding whoever, or whatever, it was to leave. The forest responded only with silence. For a moment, she believed it was over. Then the slapping resumed. And this time, a massive hand struck the window 7 feet above their bed, far too high for any person to reach. By the third night, Dee had heard the sounds of what she described as 2 deep, guttural voices. Not human, but structured, like language. She recognized the strange chatter from her visits to the zoo with her grandchildren. Like primates, she would later recall, though stronger, darker, more deliberate. The final night was the worst. Something dragged long claws or nails across the side of the cabin, shrieking against the wood. The sound jolted Peter awake. He stumbled outside in his underwear, shouting into the night, thinking it must be a trespasser.
You know, people that know about skinwalkers assure me that there's no relation, but they seem to be Bigfoot and skinwalkers. Activity seems to be going on in the same area.
But when Dee stepped onto the deck with her gun, what she saw paralyzed her. 30 feet away, behind a narrow pine, stood a massive figure. Reddish-brown hair, a pointed head, and arms so long its hands hung near its knees. The thing swayed slightly, watching her. For a moment, both stood frozen, predator and prey, divided only by fear and the fragile light of the cabin porch. Dee shouted, stamped her feet, and pretended to be fearless, a technique she'd learned from years of training horses. The creature didn't flinch. It only started.
And you can't see footprints out there because we have such a dense carpet of pine needles all over. So anything heavy is just going to squish down the pine needles and then they bounce back up again. So I just, was hoping at least I'd find somebody's footprints out there. I still was thinking it was a crazy person.
Then, quietly, it backed into the trees and was gone. When morning came, Dee measured the tree beside where the creature stood. 7 feet, 7 inches. No prints, no smell, just the echo of 4 sleepless nights that would change her forever. Something's still out there, watching from the shadows. These encounters keep surfacing. New sounds, new sightings, new evidence that refuses to fade away. Could it be that we're sharing this world with something we still don't fully understand? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe Bigfoot is real, or just another mystery waiting to be solved?